Hello, I'm going to explore some ideas about being fit in my 40s, inspired by Brazil. For context, my wife is Brazilian, and Brazil is fairly off the radar to most Brits' understanding, is my opinion. Okay, let's start. Here we have the Amazon. Hardly any Brazilians live here, and they don't visit it either. So, next is football. Ever since Brazil got beat 7-2 by Germany, Brazilian football's lost its magic. Roberto Carlos here, the legend, but this is all grandad talk from yesteryear. Next, Carnival. We associate Brazil with being vibrant, and the Carnival is a bit like tartan and bagpipes for Scots. It's front and centre to an outsider, but it's not obligatory, so you need to calm down. Shout out to R9 there. A lot of people think Brazil is a mecca for hedonism and good times. You can see the Brazilian flag gets centre spot of the Venga bus. But getting hammered in Rio is not a smart idea. Go to Manchester if you want to party hard. So, partying Brazil, yes and no. Depends. You'll find that yes and no is the answer to every question on Brazil, which links nicely to our Fit at 40s journey. So, Brazil's huge. It's bigger than the US. But Alaska. Population is over 200 million. But I do love sweeping generalizations. I can't think of any similar country. Tempted to say the other BRICS countries, but it's a bit harsh. I think Brazilians are more civilized. It's a Christian country. It's heavily influenced by the US rather than Europe, and definitely not Portugal or the rest of South America, really. Most people live along the coast, especially the southeast. North's generally poor, south's rich, inland's more wild. So let's dive into the food. Got to start with the Brazilian buffet. In Brazil, lunch is king. A big lunch is a Brazilian cultural norm, and lunch is quite early. I feel 12 onwards on. It's quite the inverse of British eating, where we sort of have big brunches and snacks at lunchtime. It takes getting used to, actually, to regularly have a big lunch. We don't normally do it regularly. Kind of throws off your whole daily cycle if you do normally have a big lunch. So the buffet, it consists of many pots and dishes. You serve it yourself, and you load up a plate of what you can carry. Really, once you've been to a few, you get to recognise patterns of what's generally on offer. Plain boiled rice seems to be just it's a thing. It appears everywhere. I don't really know why, but it's there. French fries, again, they always seem to be the same. Whoever makes chips in Brazil must be the chip king. So you've got lots of potatoes, salads, meats, vegetables, sausage, more sort of continental, Germanic looking sausage rather than British. Fish, it's often fish there. They tend to put funny things on fish like cheese, but and breaded meats seems to be quite common. Like chicken Milanese, and of course the famous beans, which go well with rice and other things. I wouldn't say standalone beans are that great, but they do complement other stuff. And there's often a grilled meat section. It's usually served separately at a sort of a man station, which is, I say, is the highlight of a buffet. Saying general dishes are not particularly powerful or spiced. It's not like Indian food or other forms of cooking. Say people tend to add condiments like chili sauce at the end to pep up the food. So it's not super strong taste. You're like, oh, that's a Brazilian dish. It's more in line with British, actually, I'd say. You can nearly always put together a plate of something decent. It's hit and miss with quality, depending on where you go. You need to be thinking, how long's the food been out there? Sometimes these casseroles, the meat doesn't fall off the bone, in my opinion. But you get wise to it and can put together a plate that's decent most times. I noticed that you can layer up your plate quite well with little bits of this and that, especially carbs. You can multi-carb to that rice with chips instead of just a big plate of chips. So it's quite easy to create a well-rounded plate and one that fills you up. So after you've had a Brazilian lunch, you realise it's really not rocket science. You don't need all these superfoods. Just when it's all laid out in front of you, you can just make a well-rounded meal and think no more of it. So every buffet lunch, you have quite a lot of control, and that's a topic I'll talk about later, is self-control. Do I like the Brazilian food? Yes and no. If I change the question to do I like food in Brazil, I'd say yeah, I was generally impressed by the quality throughout wherever I went. The Brazilian cuisine itself is quite strange. It's for a hot country. It's heavy food. Brazilians are known to take many showers throughout the day to cool down, but the celebrated cooking always looks more suited to a winter bothy up Ben McDewey. Just it's quite heavy. So many of the creations are calorific in the American style. Like, so I'm going to take pizza as an example. A Brazilian pizza can sink a battleship. Whether it's good or not, it's just an opinion. Some things I just don't really like chicken lasagna or these creamy, cheesy casseroles are just not for me, but I suppose a lot of people like them. Anyway, that leads to the question, does the heavy food and calories cause weight gain? Perhaps not as much as I assumed, but I don't really know, and I might be missing something. Brazilians are skilled bakers. The cakes and breads are all usually pretty good, delicious, actually. The cakes appear at breakfast buffets in hotels, and that is deadly because there's no doubt that when I was putting on weight, it's because I was hammering cakes at breakfast. And they have bakeries called padarias that are commonplace. They're really good. Brazil has many savoury snacks, hot snacks that you'd sort of expect in a place like Britain. Here's little croquettes filled with meat called coxinhas, usually chicken. It's quite easy to get stuffed in Brazil. You eat a couple of those. And here we have the famous Brazilian barbecue. Salted meats, not really with rubs. They're usually just roasted. I'm a huge fan of the red meat. The limiting factor in these barbecues is usually how much salt you can take in one sitting. The quality of the meat in South America is something I'm not sure enough to comment on, but I do want to look into it further. And it's just meat production around the world, so I'll just say it's probably varied, but it can be pretty good. Brazil's exotic fruits are all abundant, which is great. Coconut water, passion fruits, bananas, papaya. Ordering freshly squeezed orange juice in Brazil is standard, whereas in Britain that's ridiculous. You'll never get it. So I think the fruit, it can counterbalance some of the more indulgent aspects of the Brazilian diet. Brazilians are not boozers, even with these strong cocktails. It's not a drinking culture. Coffee is popular, but that's kind of universal. See, the Brazilians drink quite small coffees, with sugar and no milk's sort of the norm. Again, each to their own. The Achilles heel for Brazilians is fizzy drinks, juice, Coca-Cola, that sort of thing. It's very popular. So as time moves on, will the traditional Brazilian buffet fade out and be replaced by more Americanized eating? Yes, it's possible. And look at Mexico. It's bad. So is it easier to eat healthily in Brazil or in the UK? Brazil is no brainer. The only exception is if money was no object. But even then, you'd be surrounded by the drink culture in Britain. So, okay, here we have the skyline in Blade Runner. This is how I describe Sao Paulo when you fly in. I've never seen anything like it. It makes London look like Cambridge or something. When I arrived in Sao Paulo, I was terrified of everything. I slowly relaxed into just keeping my wits about me, but taking Ubers everywhere is the done thing. I did venture out walking, and in fact, I did quite like it. I quite like Sao Paulo. It's so big that it's got everything, and that competition just from having so many restaurants, it drives up the standards for food. I thought, which was good. Rio de Janeiro, I'm sure, was the inspiration for Streets of Rage. It's wild. I went out walking around Copacabana Beach and the back streets to get the vibe, the armed robbery vibe. But people are chilled during the day, and I wasn't attacked by a flak of zombies, so all good. When we think of Brazil, we often think carnival, with people going nuts. Brazilians like parties and dancing, but I'd say people are generally chill and quite quiet in public. I noticed that at the airport even. I was quite relaxed and everyone's orderly and low key. So they're not like firecrackers. Take an example. I went to watch Flamengo versus Vasco at night, and all the police are out looking like Universal Soldier, and the fans are separated like it's going to proper kick off, and a lot of the guys look like thug life characters. However, inside, everyone entering the stadium looked pretty sober, and during the match, all the Flamengo fans pretty much just sing songs and chant. It's all spirited. It's nice. I think I was the only one booing the ref or slagging off the other players, but anyway, finished 4-3 and everyone goes home happy into the lawless Rio night. If you contrast that to, say, an Old Firm game where it's like 50,000 hammered clowns going proper hostile atmosphere, but in the back of their minds, it's a safe country. This contrast mentality plays out a lot in Brazil. Brits have lunatic tendencies of no self-control. Like, why? Well, we live in the nanny state, and things don't really kick off here. Nothing serious. We do have a hard man culture, but it's based around assumptions of law and order. You can down a pint and start throwing cheers when you feel safe. Like the England fans. In Brazil, you have to be careful at all times. There's bad hombres out there, and in the back of your mind, is there. It's dangerous. That's where this idea of self-control and how you conduct yourself and live your life. If you live in Brazil, you need to keep your wits about you at all times and self-govern. The second most popular sport in Brazil is MMA. I saw lots of people rolling around glass front jiu-jitsu studios learning to fight is mainstream and it's very popular. So what I really love about South America and Brazil is the spirit. You feel it. I think every guy is drawn towards this idea of the spirit I'm talking about. I felt it there in Buenos Aires and in Brazil. Something in Brazil like hits deep. It's like spiritual and earthly without sounding like a Peruvian retreat for Americans. Ironically, though, in Brazil, there's this superficial macho culture that's sort of seen as comical, like Johnny Bravo, vanity and along with being a womanizer, but behind the macho culture is the ever-present feeling of not being safe in Brazil, and for that reason, I think women don't want Mr. Wimp by their side. And again, this is a generalization, and there's plenty of wimpy guys in Brazil, especially the gringos. Not me, but you get the idea. The Brazilian macho man is different to like the UK lad in Ibiza or whatever. The Brazilian macho man won't be seen downing a pint, jumping off a booze cruise. He's more about a cold bottle of beer, just being a cool dude. There's more self-control, apart from when it comes to monogamy. But I'll leave that for another day. Gym culture is really big in Brazil. It's like America. Only they seem to be more into like bodybuilding just for like a desired aesthetic rather than chasing numbers or anything deeper. I noticed bodybuilding is popular with older guys and older women. They seem to be equally into it, if not more so. This is really good to note for fit at 40s. Elephant in the room is obviously rampant juicing for both men and women. Brazilians are very direct and they are enthusiastic about intervention to achieve their goals. Let's leave it at that. Also got to mention is it's a real melting pot of genetics, and some folk are just tiny and others are like NBA giants. So it's really all over the place. Brazilians are into working out in the gym. Yep, I've covered that. And like I repeat, it didn't seem much what I'd say is like performance-driven exercise, like the rugby team. But I'll get into that later. I think it's very lazy if we just say, "Oh, it's the pressure to look good on the beach that ramps up the aesthetic cultures in Brazil." In fact, on the beach, I thought it was perfectly normal-looking people, really. And yeah, the beach is a factor, but I think in Brazil, to look good is to feel good, and being passionate about vitality it fuels ambition, and especially in a sink or swim country like Brazil. However, I accept a lot of Brazilians will just say, "Oh, nah, the culture is judgmental." That's people are judgmental. That's the driver. So working out is quite normalised in Brazil. This workout station that wouldn't be allowed in the UK is it's not inclusive to those who can't do pull-ups or dips. In Brazil, they're everywhere, and this sends a really fresh message. Working outside is so cool. That's one of my favourite things in Brazil. I mean, when I say working outside, it's like, they're not going for max deadlift day and stuff like that, but it's you get the vibe. It's something I noticed. Brazilians are super slow in the gym, walking, and especially running, which is very popular. They all look the part, like this guy, but they're all jogging at tortoise speed. It's something I'm going to touch on later. I think it actually is a good thing. In Britain, everyone does everything hard. I mean, a jog means it's a Strava time trial. So let's touch on how America influenced our generation in the UK. Americans are by nature obsessive and hyper competitive. They want to win at all costs, and being the champ is what it's all about. No day off is the American way. They invest their identity so heavily that they go down rabbit holes and eventually go insane. That's what I think, anyway. And I think our generation, we got mesmerised by this gym bro. And now it's so hard not to have this like Jiminy Cricket punk on our shoulders all the time. We don't really know what to do with it in our 40s. It's like, yes, this Jim Bro man's very useful and very addictive, but I don't know, we're just thinking that maybe the Brazilian spirit can help us deal with the mental angst of being the Jim Bro in your 40s. Because we're not facing a binary outcome of being jacked or being a dweeb, but the Jim Bro would say, hell yes, we are. But even the wise old gym bros online, none of them are they? They're not true naturals. It's always the case. It's always like, juices. The British way is to find a noble pursuit to reveal our character, some sort of endeavour of the heart and soul. If there's a lunatic trying to swim to Antarctic will be a Brit with one leg or something bizarre. That's what us Brits are all about. Achieving something that goes on the school record in the Corinthian spirit. And Northern Europeans, we also like picking up heavy things, and we just don't know when to bow out of this. We start by tinkering with, say, rest hard, train hard, versus little and often. You start talking about, oh well, like cycle it both, winter, little by little, summer, train hard, rest hard. Let's discuss it. And you can see it starts to open a can of worms. And this is our problem. The over 40s have a body that is no longer Olympian, but we have a bloody mindedness that is at its peak. And when people don't humbly accept what's going on, then it seems like inevitably falls into this dweebery, and so many end up like this in Britain. You can see the Marathon Man, or and it's typified by the mammal. I don't know if that's a British thing or what, but it's a dweeb on a bike who looks like a dweeb and is a dweeb. The truth is, like once I'm properly warmed up and I'm out there, I sort of roll back the years. I get blinded, and I feel like I'm Steve McManaman gliding down the wing, and it's 1996. That does happen, but a few hours later, I'm absolutely floored, and it takes the rest of the week to recover, and I wither away mentally and physically. Seems to be something that we play with in our 40s, and I feel that the Brazilian spirit may counter it. Be full of energy rather than exert all your energy. Slow the process down for the joy of it. Run slowly for the joy of it. Now, take longer between sets. Keep the heart rate down. Want to gleam, not be posting Strava maps. Having a positive well-being is this balance between being on a mission and enjoying what we already have. We can maybe dial back to feel at peace in the present in regards to how we go about training. Because I feel like being old and in shape can go down a rabbit hole into something that I don't really want to become. I see this sort of thing. Everything being a battle to prove yourself or to yourself, it leads to becoming a weird dweeb pretty fast. So if we embrace the South American spirit and take our time and be relentless with the slow wins as they add up, and keep the fundamentals on repeat, live well and don't sweat over the small stuff like forgetting creatine or things like that. Anyway, at the end of this video, I'm instantly wondering if it's a load of nonsense, but at least it got me thinking to myself instead of being told what to think. So the classic phrase, I know that I don't know, is better than I don't know that I don't know. So that's me. Thank you.